Hello, my dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to another emotional story here on the Thread of Hope channel. Today, I have brought you a narrative that will stir all of our hearts. We are going to discover the story of a humble maid who awakens an all-consuming passion in her millionaire employer. But when she discovers she is carrying his heir in her womb, secrets come to light. Families are divided, and one decision will change everyone's destiny forever. Can love truly conquer all social barriers? Will he choose his heart or his family's fortune? Before we begin, I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for joining us here on the Thread of Hope channel, not just from Brazil, but from all over the world. And a warm welcome to our new friends who are just now arriving and subscribing. You are all so very welcome here. A special embrace to our dear friends in Portugal who are always present in the comments. You are incredible. I am so surprised and moved to see that the majority of our listeners are seniors. You bring a wisdom and a life experience that enriches our channel so much. I love every comment you leave, every personal story you share, every word of kindness. I try to reply to all the comments, but I can't always manage because of the sheer number. But please know, we are always reading every single one. You are the reason I am here every day, bringing these narratives that touch the soul. And tell me in the comments, what are you doing while you listen to me? Are you preparing a special dinner, tidying up the house, or perhaps you're in traffic on your way home from work? I'm always so curious to know how our stories fit into your daily lives. And now, yes, let us begin today's story. Prepare your hearts, because this is going to be a journey of many emotions. The Santana family mansion stood, imposing and majestic, in Barra da Tijuca, with views of the beach and manicured gardens that stretched to the sea. It was one of those houses you look at and immediately think, very rich people live there, the kind featured in Rio's interior design magazines. And you would be right. The Santana family owned one of the largest civil construction companies in Rio de Janeiro. And Margareth Santana ran it all with an iron fist, even years after her husband had passed away. Carolina Silva arrived every day at 6 in the morning to begin her work as a domestic maid. She came by bus from the North Zone, waking up at 4:30 to catch two different lines and arrive in Barra punctually. She was a young woman of 23, with brown hair always tied back in a simple ponytail and dark eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She wasn't the kind of person who turned heads with exuberant beauty, but she had something special, a sweetness in her nature that made people like her instantly. Carolina came from a humble family in Pilares, and when she landed this job at the Santana mansion, she was deeply grateful. The salary was good, better than anything she could get with her high school education. Every day, Carolina followed the same routine. She would arrive early, greet Donna Margareth politely, and begin cleaning the enormous three-story house. She was meticulous with every detail, polishing the furniture until it gleamed, sweeping and mopping every room with a view of the sea, and tending to the family's laundry with great care. Carolina was one of those people who does everything with love, even when the work is hard. She always told herself that it didn't matter what kind of work you did. What mattered was doing it well and with dignity. When she cleaned the huge living room windows, She would sometimes pause for a second to admire the ocean view, thinking how different life could be depending on where you were born. Rodrigo Santana was 32 years old and Margareth's only son. He had taken over a significant part of the family business after his father's death, and everyone knew he was a cornerstone of the company. Rodrigo was a handsome man, tall, with dark, always well-kept hair, and eyes that showed intelligence and determination. He wore expensive suits, drove imported cars, and had everything money could buy. But if you looked closely, you could see a certain sadness deep in his eyes, as if all that wealth couldn't fill a void he felt inside his chest. Rodrigo's life was a routine of intense work in downtown Rio. He woke up early, had breakfast on the veranda overlooking the beach, and spent the entire day managing the company's business from the office in Copacabana. Meetings, contracts, business trips, important decisions that moved millions of reais. Rodrigo was respected in Rio's business circles, known as a serious and competent man. But when he arrived home at the end of the day, after battling the heavy Barra traffic, he felt tired in a way that wasn't just physical. It was as if something was missing from his life, something that all his financial success couldn't provide. It was on a Monday morning that Rodrigo truly noticed Carolina for the first time. He was coming down the stairs for breakfast when he saw the young woman cleaning the entrance hall. Carolina was on her knees, wiping down the imported marble floor with a damp cloth and humming a soft samba that Rodrigo didn't recognize. There was something so genuine in that moment, so simple and true, that he stopped midway down the stairs and just watched. Carolina worked with a dedication that was impressive, as if she were caring for her own home. The sea breeze drifted in through the open windows, gently rustling her hair. When she lifted her head and saw Rodrigo standing on the stairs, she blushed and said quickly, "Good morning, Senor Rodrigo," lowering her eyes with shyness. "Good morning, Carolina," Rodrigo replied. And for the first time, he noticed how beautiful her name sounded when he said it. Carolina went back to her work, but Rodrigo stood there for a few more seconds, feeling a strange sensation in his chest. He had never truly paid attention to Carolina, even though she had been working in the house for almost a year. But in that moment, seeing her dedication, the loving way she cared for every detail, something stirred within him. During breakfast, Rodrigo found himself thinking about the maid. Margareth spoke of the day's commitments, of important meetings at the company, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Carolina's shy smile, the way she hummed while she worked, her simple yet enchanting manner. Rodrigo shook his head, trying to focus on business, but he couldn't get her image out of his mind. That same week, Rodrigo began to notice other details. How Carolina always arrived on time, despite coming from so far away. How she treated his mother with respect, but without the insincerity he saw in other people. How she cared for the houseplants as if they were her own, watering each one with care. Rodrigo realized that Carolina had a special light, a genuine joy that contrasted with the often tense atmosphere of the mansion. In the weeks that followed, Rodrigo began to change his routine without even realizing it. He who always rushed out of the house to avoid being late for meetings in the city center now lingered a little longer over breakfast on the veranda, always finding an excuse to pass through the living room where Carolina was working. Sometimes, he'd pretend he had forgotten an important document on his office desk, Other times, he'd say he needed to check something in the house before leaving. Margareth didn't suspect a thing yet. She thought her son was just being more attentive to domestic details, which even made her a little proud. Rodrigo would invent conversations about renovations to the mansion, about changes in the decor, anything that would justify his presence in the same rooms where Carolina worked. The truth was, he felt a strange need to be near her, to hear her voice, to see that shy smile she gave whenever they met in the hallways. Carolina also began to notice that her employer was different, and it affected her in a way she had never experienced before. Rodrigo had always been polite to her, but now he seemed to pay more attention to everything she did. He greeted her more warmly, sometimes even asking how her bus trip from Pilares to Barra had been, if she wasn't too tired from the long journey. She was genuinely surprised by these questions because, in her experience, wealthy people usually weren't interested in the difficult lives of those who worked for them. They didn't want to know about waking up in the pre-dawn hours, about the heavy traffic, about the crowded buses. But Rodrigo seemed genuinely interested, and it touched Carolina's heart in a way she couldn't explain, even to herself. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her stomach do flips. A good feeling, but one that also left her confused. One sunny Thursday, while Carolina was organizing the books in the library that overlooked the garden, Rodrigo appeared at the door and said, in a voice softer than usual, "Carolina, you always arrive so early. The trip from Pilares to Barra must be very tiring, especially in this Rio heat." Carolina stopped what she was doing, clutching the book in her hands, and looked at him, surprised. Not only that he knew exactly which neighborhood she came from, but that he was concerned about it. She felt her face grow warm and answered with sincerity, "It's nothing, Senor Rodrigo. I like to get here early, to do everything just right, the way your mother likes it. And look," she said, pointing to the blue sea sparkling under the strong morning sun. "The view from this window makes any tiring journey worthwhile." Rodrigo followed her gaze toward the ocean and smiled in a way Carolina had never seen before. A true, warm smile, so different from the formal one he used with people from high society. This moment marked a subtle but important shift in the dynamic between them. Rodrigo began to find more opportunities to talk with Carolina, always respectfully, but with a growing intimacy that surprised them both. He asked about her family, her dreams, what she liked to do on weekends when she wasn't working. Carolina, in turn, found herself looking forward to these conversations, waiting for the moments when she could speak with him without Dona Margareth present. She started to notice details she had never seen before. How Rodrigo had a handsome smile when he was relaxed, how his eyes sparkled when he truly laughed, how he had a gentle way of speaking that contrasted with the seriousness he showed in the business world. Carolina would catch herself thinking about him during her work, imagining what it would be like to have longer conversations, to know more about the person who existed behind all that wealth and corporate responsibility. Margareth, who had always been an observant woman, attentive to everything that happened in her house, began to notice some subtle changes in her son's behavior. Rodrigo, who always had a quick breakfast and rushed out to beat the Rio traffic, now lingered at home in the mornings. Sometimes, he even arrived late to the office. She saw her son talking to Carolina more than she considered normal for an employer. And this began to bother her. even if she couldn't yet pinpoint exactly what was happening. Margareth was a woman of traditional mindset, raised in an era when social divisions were clear and respected, and she firmly believed that everyone should stay in their place. Bosses with bosses, employees with employees, without mixing things up. For now, she attributed her son's strange behavior to overwork. But a small seed of suspicion began to sprout in her mind, especially when she noticed the way Rodrigo looked at the maid when he thought no one was watching. One Friday afternoon, Carolina was cleaning the library when she found a book that had fallen behind one of the leather armchairs. It was a classic Brazilian novel, its cover worn by time and the hands that had leafed through it over the years. She spent a few minutes admiring the yellowed pages, reading a few phrases that touched her, when Rodrigo entered the room silently and watched her for a moment before speaking. "Do you like to read, Carolina?" he asked, approaching her with careful steps, as if not to startle her. Carolina was a little embarrassed at being caught handling the family's personal belongings, but she answered honestly, "I do, very much, Senor Rodrigo, but I can't afford to buy many books. Sometimes I borrow them from the public library in Pilares, but it's far, and I don't always manage to go." Rodrigo felt a pang of sadness, imagining Carolina making long journeys just to get a book. And without hesitating, he said, "You can borrow this one, and any other you'd like from the library. And please, when we're alone, just call me Rodrigo." The way he spoke, looking into her eyes with a new intensity, sent a pleasant shiver all the way down her spine. And she knew, in that moment, that something special was being born between them, something that went far beyond the formal relationship of an employer and his maid. That night, Carolina rode the bus home, hugging the book Rodrigo had lent her, feeling as though she were carrying much more than written pages. It was as if that simple gesture represented a bridge between two completely different worlds, a connection that went beyond the social barriers that had always existed between them. During the long journey to Polaris, passing through the bustling avenues of Rio, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Rodrigo had looked at her in the library, the warm tone of his voice when he asked her to call him by his first name. There was an intimacy in that request that made her heart race in a way she had never experienced before. Carolina had always been a simple girl who had dated a few boys from her neighborhood, but she had never felt this intensity, this feeling that something truly important was happening in her life. When she got home, to the small house she shared with her mother and younger sister, she locked herself in her room and started to read the book. But she found herself thinking more about Rodrigo than about the words written on the pages. The following weeks brought a palpable shift in the mansion's atmosphere. A delicious tension hung in the air whenever Rodrigo and Carolina were in the same room. They began to develop a language of their own, one woven from glances that lasted just a moment too long, from smiles that held secret meanings, and from conversations that started with daily pleasantries but ended by revealing pieces of their souls. Rodrigo discovered that Carolina harbored dreams far beyond her domestic duties. She longed to study to become a teacher. She adored music, and she knew how to play the guitar, even if her instrument was old and out of tune. In turn, Carolina discovered that beneath the serious corporate exterior, Rodrigo was a sensitive man who enjoyed reading poetry. He would sometimes spend hours on the veranda, staring out at the sea, lost in thought about his life, feeling like a prisoner to the expectations everyone had for him. These discoveries only deepened the attraction they felt, a pull that went far beyond the physical, touching the very core of their beings. Margaret, for her part, grew more vigilant, observing every movement in the house with eagle eyes. She noticed how her son lingered longer before leaving, how he sometimes invented excuses to return in the middle of the day. She saw how Carolina seemed different, more radiant, with a sparkle in her eyes that wasn't there before. The Santana family matriarch was no fool. She had lived long enough to recognize the signs of a blossoming attraction, and it unsettled her deeply. She began making subtle comments during meals, speaking of the importance of family traditions, of how crucial it was for people of different social classes to keep to their proper places. Rodrigo would listen in silence, pretending to be preoccupied, but inwardly, a rising irritation simmered against his mother's antiquated mindset. He was realizing that Carolina was worth more than any of the high society women his mother pushed on him, and it made him question so much about his own life and values. The decisive moment arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Rodrigo came home early from the office after a meeting was canceled. The house was quiet. Margaret had left for a social engagement, and Carolina was in the living room organizing some papers when she heard the key in the door. She wasn't expecting him so soon and felt a familiar flutter of nerves, the kind she always felt when they were alone. Rodrigo entered, soaked from the heavy downpour, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his dress shirt clinging to him. Instinctively, Carolina went to get a towel. "You'll get sick if you don't change soon," she said, extending the towel with a maternal care that touched Rodrigo's heart. There was something so natural in the gesture, so full of genuine affection, that he felt more welcomed than he ever had in his life. As Rodrigo took the towel, his fingers brushed against hers, and it was as if an electric current passed between them. They stood frozen, looking at each other, their breathing quickening, both sensing that something momentous was about to happen. "Carolina," Rodrigo said, his voice husky with emotion, "I can't pretend I don't feel anything for you anymore." Her knees felt weak at his confession. It was exactly what she had been feeling for weeks, but had never dared to admit, even to herself. "Me too," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But this is so complicated, Rodrigo. We come from different worlds." He stepped closer, tossing the towel onto the sofa. He cupped her face in his hands, looking deep into her brown eyes, which now glistened with unshed tears. "I don't care what world you come from, Carolina. What matters is what I feel when I'm near you, how you make my heart beat faster, how everything seems more beautiful when you're around." And then, slowly, with all the care in the world, Rodrigo leaned in and kissed her for the first time. It was a soft, tender kiss that spoke more of feelings than any words ever could. For Carolina, it felt as if the entire world had stopped, as if nothing existed beyond that kiss, which sealed the beginning of something special between them. When they parted, they were both emotional, breathing heavily, gazing at each other as if they had just discovered something precious and rare. "What happens now?" Carolina asked, the taste of his kiss still on her lips, her mind still struggling to believe it had been real. Rodrigo took her hands firmly in his. "Now," he said, with the conviction that surprised even himself, "we figure it out together. I don't care what anyone else will think, Carolina. You are special, and I want to be with you." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, planning how they would navigate this delicate situation, how they would keep their relationship a secret until they found the right time to reveal it. Carolina knew her life had changed completely on that rainy day. She had fallen in love with a man who, beyond being rich and powerful, had a good heart and treated her as if she were the most important person in the world. Rodrigo knew it too. He had found what he had been searching for years without even knowing it: a woman who loved him for who he was on the inside, not for his bank account or his family's business. In the days that followed that first kiss, Rodrigo and Carolina developed a new routine of secret encounters within the house itself. They took advantage of the moments when Margaret was out at her social engagements, when the house belonged only to them. They talked for hours, exchanged gentle affections, and discovered more about each other. Carolina told him about her childhood in Pilares, about her dreams of studying and making a better life, about how her mother worked tirelessly to support the family after her father left when she was just a child. Rodrigo spoke of the crushing pressure he felt to live up to his family's expectations, of how he sometimes felt utterly alone, even when surrounded by people, and how his father's death had changed his life, forcing him to grow up too fast. These intimate conversations only strengthened the bond growing between them, building a solid foundation of mutual understanding and respect that went far beyond mere physical attraction. The weeks that followed were like living a secret dream within the mansion's daily reality. Rodrigo and Carolina developed discreet signals to communicate when Margaret was near. A look that meant, "I love you." A smile that said, "I miss you." Seemingly casual gestures that were, in truth, tender demonstrations of their affection. They became masters in the art of loving in silence, of building a profound intimacy, even under the watchful eyes of the Santana family matriarch. Carolina continued her household duties with the same dedication as always, but now every movement held a special meaning when Rodrigo was present. She took extra care in cleaning the rooms she knew he would be in. She placed fresh flowers from the garden in strategic spots. She prepared his breakfast with a love that was evident in every detail. Rodrigo, in turn, found more and more excuses to be at home, to prolong his mornings before heading to the office, to return early from meetings. He began working from home for a few hours at a time, setting up a small office in the library, explaining to his mother that he needed more tranquility to focus on important company projects. One sunny Thursday afternoon, while Margaret was at her beauty salon in Ipanema and would be gone for hours, Rodrigo found Carolina on the veranda, watering the plants that overlooked the sea. She was wearing a simple blue cotton dress, her loose hair dancing in the ocean breeze. There was something so natural and beautiful about the scene that he simply stood in the doorway for a moment, just admiring her. "You're even more beautiful when you don't know you're being watched," he said, approaching slowly, as if not to break a magic spell. Carolina turned, blushing at the compliment, but she no longer lowered her gaze as she used to. Now she could hold his stare, could see all the love shining in those dark eyes that made her feel like the most special woman in the world. "Rodrigo," she said, setting down the watering can and moving toward him. "Sometimes I'm afraid that this is all just a dream, that I'll wake up and find none of it is real." He held her face in his hands, kissing her forehead tenderly. "This is real, Carolina," he answered. his voice full of conviction. What I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. You've taught me what it means to truly love. They spent the entire afternoon together on the veranda, talking about everything and nothing, planning a future that still seemed impossible, but one they both believed they could make real. Rodrigo spoke of his desire to travel the world, to see places where they could walk hand in hand without worrying what others would think. Carolina shared her dream of having a small, cozy house with a garden where she could plant flowers and herbs, a place where they could be happy, far from all the social pressure. They were simple dreams, but they gained a special dimension when shared between two people truly in love. Rodrigo realized that next to Carolina, all his material wealth lost its importance. What truly mattered was the wealth of the love they were building together. And Carolina discovered that love could make a person feel richer than any amount of money, that having Rodrigo's heart was worth more than all the luxuries in the mansion where she worked. Meanwhile, Margaret's maternal intuition sharpened, fanning the flames of her suspicion. She noticed the small changes in the household routine. Carolina hummed more often as she worked. She had a different light in her eyes and seemed more confident, more radiant. Rodrigo was happier, more present in family conversations, but at the same time, more evasive whenever she asked about his personal life. The matriarch began to observe their interactions more closely, and although she wasn't certain, a disquieting suspicion began to form in her mind. At dinner, her comments about the importance of family traditions and the dangers of relationships across social classes became more frequent. Rodrigo listened with feigned nonchalance, but inside, a mixture of anger and determination grew. He knew his mother was trying to plant seeds of doubt, but it only strengthened his certainty that Carolina was the right woman for him, regardless of any social convention. Weekends became especially precious for the couple. Margaret often visited friends in Petropolis or went to their beach house in Buzios, leaving the mansion freer for them to express their love. On one sunny Saturday, Carolina was preparing a special lunch in the kitchen when Rodrigo came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed her neck. "You're making this house smell like paradise," he murmured in her ear, making her laugh in that spontaneous way he adored. "It's just a simple dish," she replied, turning in his arms to look into his eyes, "but made with a lot of love." They stood there, embraced in the kitchen, swaying slowly to a rhythm only they could hear, feeling as if they had found their own little piece of heaven on earth. Rodrigo realized in that moment that he had never been happier. All the years of loneliness and existential emptiness had been worth it, because they had led him to Carolina. She, too, realized she had found not just a great love, but a true partner, someone who respected her, valued her opinions, and made her feel important and special. As the weeks passed, their relationship deepened in every dimension. They discovered they were compatible not only in love and physical attraction, but also in their fundamental values, their worldview, and the dreams they had for the future. Carolina helped Rodrigo see life from a more human, grounded perspective, teaching him to appreciate the small joys of daily life, to find beauty in the simple things money couldn't buy. In turn, Rodrigo encouraged Carolina to dream bigger, to believe she could achieve anything she wanted, that her humble origins did not define her limits. He began to talk about the possibility of her returning to her studies, how he could help her achieve her dream of becoming a teacher, how together they could build a life where love was more important than any social rule. These plans for the future brought them even closer, creating a complicity that went far beyond passion, a true partnership based on mutual respect and sincere admiration. The love growing between Rodrigo and Carolina was becoming something solid and true, but also more perilous with each passing day. They knew they couldn't keep their secret forever. At some point, they would have to face the world and publicly declare their feelings. This knowledge brought a sweet urgency to every moment they spent together, as if each conversation, each kiss, each embrace was all the more precious, for it could be shattered at any moment by the cruel reality of the social divide between them. The month of March brought an intense heat to Rio de Janeiro, and the sea breeze that drifted through the mansion's windows seemed to carry promises of profound change. Rodrigo and Carolina had reached a point in their relationship where every shared glance held an almost unbearable intensity, where every casual touch during their secret talks left a fiery brand on their skin. They knew they were walking toward a decisive moment, a point of no return that would seal their fate. Then, on one particularly hot Tuesday, Margaret announced she would be spending 3 days in Petropolis at the home of a high society friend, a trip she took regularly to maintain her social connections. Carolina and Rodrigo exchanged a look heavy with meaning when they heard the news. Both knew that these few days alone in the mansion could be a unique opportunity to fully express the love that had been growing between them for weeks. The expectation was almost palpable, a sweet tension that set their hearts racing whenever they passed each other in the halls. On their first night alone, after Margareth had departed for Petropolis with 2 suitcases and a list of detailed instructions for Carolina, they sat down to dinner together for the first time. It was a completely new experience for them both, to sit at the table as equals, with no need to keep up appearances or pretend they were merely employer and employee. Carolina prepared a simple but delicious meal, using seasonings her mother had taught her, filling the kitchen with aromas that spoke of warmth and care. Rodrigo helped set the table, lit candles, and put on soft music that played quietly as they spoke of their lives, their fears, and their most intimate dreams. Throughout the meal, they couldn't stop looking at each other, as if seeing one another truly for the first time, without masks, without social barriers, just two people deeply in love who had found a rare chance to be completely at ease. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by spontaneous laughter, by silences heavy with meaning, and by glances that said more than any words could. After dinner, they moved to the veranda overlooking the sea, the place where their most intimate conversations often took place. The night was particularly beautiful, with stars glittering in the dark sky and the sound of waves breaking on the shore, creating a perfect soundtrack for the moment. Carolina was wearing a simple white dress Rodrigo had never seen before. There was something almost ethereal in the way the moonlight illuminated her face, highlighting a natural beauty that needed no makeup or expensive jewelry to shine. "You look beautiful tonight," Rodrigo said, pulling her closer on the veranda sofa. "Actually, you always look beautiful, but tonight is different." Carolina smiled with a shyness that still surfaced at times, even after all the intimacy they had shared. It's because tonight I feel completely free to be myself with you, she answered, resting her head on his shoulder, inhaling the masculine scent that always made her feel safe and loved. It's as if all the fears and insecurities have vanished, as if it's just the two of us in the entire world. Rodrigo gently cupped her chin, turning her face to his. He saw it all in her eyes, the love she felt, the trust she placed in him, the surrender she was ready to make. Carolina, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. You've changed my life completely. You've made me discover who I really am, beneath all the expectations of my family and society. Tears of happiness welled in her eyes. They were the exact words her heart had needed to hear. I love you too, Rodrigo, she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched his face. And I don't care what happens in the future, what people will say, or what difficulties we'll face. All I know is that I want to be with you. I want to build a life by your side. I want to be your partner in everything. The kiss that followed was unlike any they had shared before. It was filled with an intensity and depth that spoke of commitment, of total surrender, of a true and profound love. When they finally parted, they both knew the moment they had been moving toward for so long had arrived. Without rush or anxiety, but with a naturalness that surprised them both, they rose and walked together to Rodrigo's room, where the soft light of a lamp cast an intimate, welcoming glow. Every gesture that followed was made with the utmost care, a delicate dance where each movement held a special meaning. Rodrigo treated her as if she were made of precious crystal, with a tenderness that contrasted with the passion burning in his eyes. Carolina gave herself to him completely, without reservation or fear, trusting the man who loved her with an intensity she had never imagined could exist. It was a night of mutual discovery, of whispered affections, of promises of eternal love, exchanged between kisses and embraces that seemed to sear every second of that unique, special moment into their memories forever. The next morning, they awoke in each other's arms, the golden light of the Rio sun streaming through the windows, illuminating their relaxed, happy faces. Carolina rested her head on Rodrigo's chest, listening to the calm beat of his heart, feeling more complete than she ever had in her life. Rodrigo slowly stroked her hair, thinking that this was the first of many mornings he wanted to wake up just like this, with the woman he loved in his arms, feeling he had finally found his place in the world. Good morning, my love, he murmured, kissing the top of her head with infinite tenderness. Good morning, she replied, lifting her face to look at him, her eyes shining with love. I've never been this happy, she said, touching his face as if to be sure it was all real, and not just a wonderful dream. They stayed in bed, talking softly, making plans for the day, for the future, feeling as though they had created a world of their own where only love mattered. The next 2 days passed like an early honeymoon. They lived as a loving couple in their own home, cooking together, watching sunsets from the veranda, taking long walks on the beach at dawn when no one was there to see them, and talking late into the night. Carolina discovered a playful side of Rodrigo he showed to no one else, a man who could laugh at himself, who enjoyed popular Brazilian music, and whose sense of humor could make her laugh until she cried. Rodrigo discovered that Carolina was even more special than he had imagined. An intelligent woman with interesting opinions, a careful listener with a natural wisdom that came not from books, but from life itself. They knew these days were a precious gift, a pause from the complex reality they would have to face when Margareth returned, and they decided to savor every minute as if it were their last. When Margareth came back from Petropolis on Thursday afternoon, she found the house impeccably clean, but there was something different in the air, something she couldn't quite identify. Carolina seemed more radiant than ever, with a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Rodrigo was more relaxed, more cheerful, as if some internal tension had completely dissolved. The Santana matriarch was too experienced not to notice the signs, and a more concrete suspicion began to form in her watchful mind. She started observing every interaction between her son and the maid more closely, noting glances that lingered too long, smiles that seemed to carry secret meanings, a subtle but palpable intimacy for anyone who knew what to look for. Margaret decided she needed to be more vigilant. Perhaps it was time for a serious conversation with her son about the choices he was making and the consequences they could have for the Santana family's future. 3 weeks after that special night that changed everything, life in the mansion seemed to proceed as normal. But beneath the surface, a current of happiness and complicity connected the two secret lovers. Carolina woke up every day with a smile, humming as she did her chores, feeling as though she were floating on a cloud of joy that no difficulty could shake. Rodrigo, in turn, had become a visibly happier man, more present in family conversations, more patient with the demands of his company, as if he had found a source of positive energy that sustained him in every aspect of his life. They continued to find creative ways to show their love, even under Margareth's watchful eyes. Small, affectionate gestures disguised as courtesy, intimate conversations, whispered in the hallways, romantic notes hidden where only the intended recipient would find them. It was a delightful routine of clandestine love that made them feel like protagonists in an epic romance, fighting against social conventions for a pure and true love. It was on a sunny Monday morning that Carolina began to notice something different about her body. She awoke with a strange feeling in her stomach, a subtle nausea she couldn't explain. During the breakfast she prepared for the family, the smell of the strong coffee she had always loved now made her feel ill, and she had to slip out to the veranda for fresh air. She tried to ignore the signs at first, attributing them to fatigue or a passing virus. But as the week went on, the symptoms became more persistent. In addition to the morning sickness, she noticed her breasts were tender, and she felt an inexplicable fatigue even after a full night's sleep. Certain foods she had always enjoyed now repulsed her. It was when her period failed to arrive that Carolina had to face the possibility she had been trying to avoid. She might be pregnant with Rodrigo's child. The official discovery came on a Tuesday after she bought a pregnancy test from a discreet pharmacy far from her neighborhood. She stood in the pharmacy's restroom, holding the positive result in her trembling hands, the world shifting on its axis. She cried for a few minutes, not from sadness, but from a complex mix of all fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. She was carrying the child of the man she loved. A child conceived in the purest love she had ever known. But she also knew this pregnancy was an enormous complication that could destroy everything she and Rodrigo had built. On the crowded bus ride home, she wondered how she would tell Rodrigo, how he would react. Would he be happy, or would he feel pressured by the social and familial implications? She thought of Margareth, of the explosive reaction she would surely have upon discovering her maid was expecting the family heir. In the days that followed, Carolina struggled to find the courage to tell Rodrigo. She watched him during their daily interactions, saw how happy and relaxed he was, and her heart ached at the thought that her news could change everything. She knew he loved her, but a child was a permanent responsibility that went far beyond romantic feelings. Would he be ready to face the social consequences of having a child with his maid? During sleepless nights, Carolina would whisper to the child she could not yet feel, promising to protect it, to love it unconditionally, even if the whole world turned against them. Meanwhile, Margareth began to notice subtle changes in Carolina's behavior that sharpened her suspicions. The maid, always so efficient, now seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. Margareth noted her loss of appetite, the way she sometimes rushed from the kitchen during meal prep, her lingering tiredness. Having gone through a pregnancy herself, the matriarch recognized the classic signs. One Thursday morning, when Carolina ran to the bathroom shortly after arriving, Margareth began connecting the dots, and a terrible suspicion solidified in her mind. She decided to watch Carolina even more closely, waiting for the right moment to confirm what she feared and take the necessary steps to protect the Santana family's reputation. The moment of truth came on a Friday afternoon. Margareth discreetly followed Carolina and saw her buying anti-nausea medication at a nearby pharmacy. The confirmation filled Margareth with a cold fury. That night, after Carolina had gone home, she confronted Rodrigo with a calculated chill that made it clear she knew everything. "We need to talk about your favorite maid," she said, her tone leaving no doubt in Rodrigo's mind that his mother had discovered their secret. "It seems she's been having some very interesting health problems lately." Rodrigo felt the blood run cold in his veins. He understood the implication in his mother's words and realized the moment he had always dreaded had finally arrived. The battle he knew he would one day have to fight was about to begin, and he would have to be prepared to defend the love of his life and the child she carried, no matter the cost. Margareth's discovery marked the end of their secret happiness and the beginning of a period of confrontation and difficult decisions that would test the very strength of their love for one another. Carolina was not yet aware that her secret was out, but she could feel a rising tension in the mansion's air, like a storm gathering swiftly on the sunny horizon of her happiness. Rodrigo, meanwhile, knew the moment of decision had arrived. He had to choose between family approval and true love, between financial security and emotional fulfillment, between the life he had always known and the one he yearned to build with the woman he loved and the child they were bringing into the world. The confrontation between Margareth and Rodrigo took place in the mansion's study on a rainy Saturday morning. Carolina had the day off and was not there to witness the explosion of rage and disappointment. the Santana family matriarch could no longer contain. Margareth slammed the door shut, turning to her son with eyes blazing with indignation. She didn't mince words. Rodrigo, I know everything that's going on between you and that maid. Do you think I'm blind? That I don't notice what happens in my own house? Her voice trembled with contained fury, and Rodrigo could see the enormous effort she was making not to scream and awaken the entire neighborhood with the scandal. Have you completely lost your mind? Have you forgotten who you are? What family you come from? Your position in society? Margaret paced the study like a caged beast, gesticulating wildly as she unleashed her accumulated frustration. And now, on top of everything, she's pregnant. Pregnant, Rodrigo. Do you have any idea what this means for our family, for our reputation, for the business we've spent years building? Rodrigo listened to his mother's verbal assault in silence, a mixture of anger and determination building in his chest. He was preparing for the battle he knew he had to fight. When Margareth paused for breath, Rodrigo rose from the armchair and looked directly into his mother's eyes with a firmness she did not expect to see. Mother, I love Carolina more than anything in this world, he said, his voice calm, but filled with a conviction that cut through the air like a sharp blade. And yes, she is expecting my child, a child conceived in the purest and truest love I have ever known. I am not ashamed of it, and I regret nothing that has happened between us. Margaret was stunned by her son's frankness and determination. She had expected him to deny everything, to apologize, to promise to immediately end this inappropriate relationship. You are completely insane, she shrieked, losing the elegant composure she always maintained. That woman is an opportunist who saw a chance to get ahead in life. She seduced you, manipulated you, and now she's using a pregnancy to trap you. Can't you see that? A deep rage surged in Rodrigo's throat as he heard his mother speak that way about Carolina, the most pure and honest woman he knew. Carolina is nothing like you say, he retorted, his voice rising for the first time. She loves me for who I am, not for what I have. She is 1,000 times more dignified and honest than any woman from our social class you've ever tried to push on me. The argument intensified as Margaret realized her son was unwilling to yield an inch. She changed tactics, attempting to appeal to the rational, calculating side she had always seen in Rodrigo's business dealings. Think carefully about what you are doing, my son, she said, trying to control her voice and adopt a more persuasive tone. You have responsibilities to this family, to the company your father built, to the hundreds of employees who depend on us. A scandal like this could destroy our reputation in the business world, cost us important contracts, and affect the lives of many innocent people. She approached Rodrigo and took his hands, attempting a show of maternal concern that barely concealed the manipulation beneath. I understand you feel attracted to her. I understand you might have confused gratitude with love, but this will pass. You are young. You will find a suitable woman for your position, and you will have legitimate children who can inherit our legacy with dignity. Rodrigo snatched his hands away, offended by the insinuation that his child with Carolina would be any less legitimate or worthy than another. My child with Carolina will be just as legitimate as any child I might have, he declared vehemently, and she will be my wife. I don't care what you or anyone else thinks about it. It was then that Margareth revealed her true intentions, dropping the mask of maternal concern to show the hard, calculating face she used in her toughest business negotiations. Rodrigo, if you do not immediately on me end this ridiculous relationship, and if you do not get rid of that maid and the child she is carrying, I will disinherit you completely, she said with a coldness that made Rodrigo's blood run cold. You will lose everything: your stake in the company, your inheritance, your place in the family, your financial future. You will walk out of this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. She crossed her arms, adopting an authoritarian stance that made it clear she was not bluffing. I built this empire with your father, and I will not allow you to destroy it over a sexual whim with some common maid. You choose her or your family, that bastard or your future, a life of romantic poverty or the reality of the power and wealth that have always been your birthright. Rodrigo remained silent for a few seconds, processing the gravity of his mother's threats. But when he answered, his voice was firm and resolute. Then I choose Carolina and my son, he said, looking directly into Margareth's eyes. I choose true love over empty wealth. I choose happiness over social approval. You can keep your money, mother. I will build my own life. Margareth's reaction was immediate and explosive. She began to scream, calling her son ungrateful, irresponsible, insane, a fool throwing away a lifetime of privilege for a romantic fantasy that would end in disaster. You will regret this decision for the rest of your life, she bellowed. When you're struggling, when you don't even have money to support this family you think you want, when you discover that love doesn't pay the rent or put food on the table, you will come back here begging for forgiveness. But I'm warning you now. If you walk out of this house today, there is no coming back. Rodrigo listened to all of his mother's threats and catastrophic predictions without a flicker of hesitation. Mother, I respect everything you and my father have built, but I will not live a life that isn't mine just to please expectations that were never my own, he replied, his serenity a stark contrast to Margareth's hysteria. Carolina makes me happy in a way all this money never could. Our son will grow up in a home filled with true love, even if it's a simple one. I would rather be poor and happy with them than rich and empty without them. Margareth made one last, desperate attempt to dissuade him, promising that if he ended things with Carolina immediately, she would find a way to resolve the pregnancy situation discreetly. They could pay the maid a generous sum to disappear and never bother the family again. Think of the child, she said, trying to sound convincing. What kind of life will this child have as the bastard son of a maid? Wouldn't it be better for everyone if this were handled before it becomes a bigger problem? Rodrigo felt a rage so intense at these words that he had to fight for control. Never speak of my son or the woman I love like that again, he said through gritted teeth. This conversation is over. I'm going to get Carolina. We're going to get married, and we're leaving this house today. You can keep your threats, your money, and your antiquated mindset. Margareth stood frozen in the middle of the study, watching her son walk to the door. She hurled one last threat, revealing the depths of her bitterness and desperation. If you walk out that door now, Rodrigo, consider yourself officially cast out of the Santana family, and don't think you'll receive a single cent for that maid's past services. Let her find her money elsewhere. Rodrigo paused at the door and turned back one last time. He answered with a dignity that showed how much he had matured in just a few months with Carolina. Mother, despite everything that has happened here today, I will always love you. but I will not let your prejudice destroy my chance at happiness. Carolina and our child are my family now, and I will protect them no matter what. He left the study, leaving Margareth alone with her rage, her frustration, and the terrible certainty that she had just lost her son forever. All because she could not accept that true love recognizes no social barriers or class differences. After the devastating confrontation with Margareth, Rodrigo left the mansion with his heart racing and a steely determination coursing through his veins. He got in his car and drove straight to Pilares, a journey he had never made before, but which now felt like the most important trip of his life. Throughout the drive through Rio's heavy traffic, passing through neighborhoods that contrasted starkly with the opulence of Barra da Tijuca, Rodrigo rehearsed how he would tell Carolina about the fight with his mother, about the radical decision he had made, about the uncertain but hopeful future that awaited them. He knew he was about to completely change the course of his life, abandoning decades of privilege and financial security. But he also knew he was making the right choice, the only choice his heart could accept. When he finally arrived on the simple street where Carolina lived, in a small but well-kept house that stood in stark contrast to the mansion he had always called home, Rodrigo realized he was literally entering a new world, a world where a person's worth wasn't measured by the size of their bank account. Carolina was in the kitchen, helping her mother prepare lunch, when she heard a knock at the door. She went to answer, expecting a neighbor or a salesman, but nearly fainted when she saw Rodrigo standing there. He looked elegant, even in casual clothes, completely out of place in this simple setting. But he was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart pound. "Rodrigo, what are you doing here?" she asked in a low voice, glancing nervously to see if any neighbors were watching. "We need to talk, Carolina," he said, taking her hands in his. "Something very important happened today, and I need to tell you everything." They went out to the small front porch, where Carolina quickly introduced Rodrigo to her mother, a simple but dignified woman who was visibly surprised and wary of her daughter's employer. Rodrigo greeted her with all the respect he could muster, trying to break the ice of the awkward situation, but he could feel his presence creating a palpable tension in the air. When they were finally alone on the porch, Carolina looked at Rodrigo with a mixture of joy at seeing him and worry about what could have brought him here. "Rodrigo, I need to tell you something very important," she began, taking a deep breath for courage. "I'm pregnant. I'm having your baby." She spoke while looking directly into his eyes, prepared for any reaction, from joy to despair. But what she saw was a beautiful smile spread across the face of the man she loved. "I know, my love," Rodrigo said, pulling her into a tight hug. "My mother found out. She confronted me this morning. That's why I came here." Carolina felt a wave of relief that she no longer had to carry the secret alone, followed by a surge of terror at the implications of his words. "What happened? How did she react?" she asked, already imagining the worst. Rodrigo held her face in his hands, his serenity a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. "She gave me an ultimatum. Either I end things with you and give up our child, or she would disinherit me and kick me out of the house, and I chose you, Carolina. I chose our family." The news sent Carolina into shock. She had to sit down on an old porch chair to process what she was hearing. "Rodrigo, you can't do this because of me," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You can't throw away your whole life, all your wealth, Your entire future for me. I'm not worth that sacrifice. Rodrigo knelt in front of her, took her trembling hands, and looked into her eyes with a determination that left no room for doubt. Carolina, you are the most valuable thing in my life. All that money, all that wealth, it means nothing if I can't share it with the person I love. Our child will have something that money can't buy. A family united by true love. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts, then continued with a conviction that surprised even himself. I have some savings in the bank, enough to support us for a while. As I restructure my life, I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to prove to everyone that I can build my own success without relying on my family's inheritance. Carolina wept with emotion at his words, feeling a love so profound for this man who was willing to sacrifice everything for her and their child. But Rodrigo, I'm just a maid, she said through her tears. I don't know anything about business, about how to live in your world. How can I help you? Rodrigo smiled tenderly, wiping the tears from her face with his thumbs. You don't have to be anything other than what you already are, Carolina. You have something that no high society woman I've ever met has. A pure heart, a genuine honesty, and an inner strength that inspires me every day. You will be my true partner, not just a decorative wife. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their new life, talking about where they would live, how they would get married, what kind of business Rodrigo could start with the knowledge he'd gained from the family company. Carolina properly introduced Rodrigo to her mother and sister, who were initially wary, but were gradually won over by the sincerity and respect he showed for their entire family. At the end of the day, as Rodrigo prepared to return to the mansion one last time to collect his belongings and move out for good, Carolina took his arm, making a final, heartfelt plea. Rodrigo, are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Once you walk out of that house, there may be no turning back. Your mother might never forgive you. Rodrigo gently kissed her forehead, his affection infinite, and answered without a trace of hesitation. Carolina, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I would rather build a simple, honest life with you than live a gilded lie without you. Our love will be the foundation for everything we build together. 3 weeks later, they were married in a simple civil ceremony, with only Carolina's family as witnesses. They moved into a small but cozy apartment in Copacabana, far from Barada Tijuca, and the painful memories of his family rupture. Meanwhile, Margareth was left alone in the enormous mansion, surrounded by the wealth she had always believed paramount, yet feeling a terrible void where her son's love used to be. In a final, vindictive gesture, she refused to pay Carolina for her services, claiming a breach of contract due to improper conduct, a move that only confirmed to Rodrigo that he had made the right decision. The Santana family matriarch hired a new maid, reorganized the household, and tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. But in her heart, she knew she had lost the most precious thing she possessed by choosing pride and social convention over her son's happiness. Rodrigo and Carolina, for their part, began their new life together with determination, love, and the certainty that they had each other to face whatever challenges the future might hold. In the first weeks after Rodrigo's departure from the mansion and the family business, Margaret tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, convinced she could manage everything on her own with the help of the other executives. She promoted a few trusted employees to assume Rodrigo's former responsibilities, redistributed tasks among departments, and strived to project an image of strength and stability, as if the Santana construction firm could thrive without its rebellious heir, who had chosen a romanticized life of poverty. During the first meetings without Rodrigo, Margareth adopted an authoritative, confident posture, assuring clients and suppliers that the company was undergoing a strategic restructuring that would only strengthen its position in Rio's competitive construction market. She sincerely believed she could prove to her son that he wasn't as indispensable as he thought. She was certain the family business could prosper without him, and that he would soon realize the grave mistake he had made in trading a life of privilege for a romantic fantasy that would inevitably end in disillusionment and financial failure. Rodrigo, in the meantime, used his personal savings to rent a small commercial office in Copacabana and start his own construction consulting firm. He had learned a great deal during his years at the family company, had developed solid relationships with clients and suppliers, and possessed a technical and strategic knowledge that few professionals in Rio de Janeiro could match. Carolina, now his wife and business partner, helped organize paperwork, answer phones, and prepare proposals, revealing a natural business acumen that surprised even Rodrigo. She was a quick study, spending her free evenings learning the technical aspects of civil engineering. She proved to be an invaluable partner, contributing not only with emotional support, but also with practical ideas and insightful strategies for winning and retaining clients. Together, they worked long hours, driven by the need to prove to themselves and to the world that they could build something solid and lasting, founded on love, hard work, and the will to succeed against all odds. The first signs of trouble at Constructora Santana appeared about 2 months after Rodrigo's departure. Key clients began to question changes in project management and customer service. Rodrigo had always had a special talent for maintaining strong business relationships, a communication style that inspired trust, and a technical know-how that allowed him to solve complex problems creatively and efficiently. Without his presence, the company began to lose the competitive edge that had set it apart. Margareth tried to compensate by taking a more active role in client meetings, but she soon discovered that her formal, traditional approach lacked the appeal of Rodrigo's modern, flexible style. Major projects started falling behind schedule. Technical problems that Rodrigo would have quickly resolved now became major obstacles, demanding far more time and resources. Employee morale also began to decline. Many had a deep respect for Rodrigo that they could not simply transfer to their new supervisors. While the family business faced these mounting challenges, Rodrigo began to reap the first rewards of his independent work. His first client was a mid-sized entrepreneur who knew his reputation and decided to take a chance on the new firm. Impressed by the dedication and personalized attention offered by Rodrigo and Carolina, the project was executed flawlessly, on time and on budget. This generated a glowing reference that opened the door to new contracts. Word spread quickly through Rio's business circles that Rodrigo Santana had opened his own firm. Soon, many clients who had worked with him at the family company began to seek out his independent services. Carolina proved essential in this growth, using her natural interpersonal skills to create a welcoming and professional atmosphere that made clients feel valued. She had a special way of remembering personal details, of asking questions that showed genuine interest, and of building a foundation of trust that greatly facilitated new business. The situation at Constructora Santana took a significant downturn when three major clients decided to cancel their contracts and migrate to Rodrigo's new company, taking with them projects worth millions in revenue. Margareth grew desperate, realizing she was losing not only money, but also the solid reputation the company had built over decades. She tried various strategies to reverse the tide, offering generous discounts, hiring new specialists, investing in expensive advertising campaigns, but nothing could compensate for the loss of Rodrigo's expertise and charisma. Most painful for Margareth was knowing that her own son was the direct beneficiary of her company's decline. Each client he won was not just a financial defeat, but a humiliating confirmation that she had completely underestimated his importance. The proud matriarch, who had always believed she was in control, began to face the bitter reality that some decisions cannot be undone, and that the price of pride is sometimes far higher than one can imagine. As the months passed, the gap between Rodrigo's growing success and the family company's escalating difficulties became ever more apparent. Rodrigo and Carolina worked tirelessly to establish their independent reputation, earning the trust of clients who valued not just their technical competence, but the personalized attention and genuine commitment they brought to every project. Their new firm was growing organically and sustainably, built on the quality of their work and the satisfaction of their clients. A solid foundation for a prosperous future that depended not on inheritance or social privilege, but on their own merit and the shared values of two people in love. 6 months after leaving the family mansion, Rodrigo and Carolina had transformed their small office into a thriving business, serving an increasingly demanding and diverse clientele. The company, which had started with a single project, now had more than 15 contracts underway, including several high-end residential developments that rivaled the sophistication of those once built by Constructora Santana. Carolina, who had initially felt insecure about her lack of business experience, discovered a natural talent for administration that impressed even the most skeptical clients. She developed an efficient organizational system that kept all projects on track, created a client service model that became a benchmark in the market, and demonstrated a commercial intuition that often salvaged negotiations that seemed lost. Rodrigo watched with growing pride as his wife transformed into a true business partner, contributing practical ideas and valuable insights that made their company more competitive and respected. Carolina's pregnancy progressed smoothly and happily during these early months of business growth. She managed to maintain her professional activities, and Rodrigo made sure to handle any tasks that might cause her extra fatigue, taking on longer meetings and site visits. Their routine became a harmonious dance, each complementing the other's skills, creating a professional synergy that impressed everyone they worked with. By night, Carolina studied business management, construction techniques, and labor law, turning her lack of formal training into a competitive advantage by approaching problems with a fresh, creative perspective. Rodrigo, in turn, found that working alongside the woman he loved gave his career a completely new meaning, transforming every professional achievement into a shared victory that deepened their bond. During Carolina's 7th month of pregnancy, they received a proposal that would change everything. A major corporate group was looking for a developer for a commercial complex in Barra da Tijuca, the very same neighborhood as the mansion Rodrigo had left behind. The project was worth millions and represented the kind of opportunity that could permanently cement their company's reputation in the luxury market. Even with her belly now prominent, Carolina insisted on participating in all the presentation meetings. She demonstrated a surprising knowledge of construction logistics, execution timelines, and human resource management that deeply impressed the corporate executives. Rodrigo presented a flawless technical plan with innovative solutions that reduced costs without compromising quality, along with a timeline more efficient than any competitors. The combination of Rodrigo's technical expertise and Carolina's administrative prowess created a proposal so compelling that the group awarded them the contract that same week. The signing of this momentous contract coincided with the birth of their first child, a healthy, beautiful boy they named Gabriel. The birth was smooth, and the baby's arrival brought an indescribable joy to the couple who had overcome so much to be together. Carolina recovered quickly, proving to be a dedicated and loving mother who balanced the baby's needs with her responsibilities at the company with a grace that surprised even herself. Rodrigo discovered a form of fatherhood completely different from the rigid, distant model he had known. He became a present, affectionate parent, involved in every aspect of his son's upbringing, from late-night feedings and diaper changes to lullabies, forging a deep and loving bond from the very beginning. The success of the commercial complex in Barra da Tijuca attracted other major clients, creating a demand that forced them to expand their team and move to a larger office in Ipanema. They hired talented architects, specialized engineers, and competent administrators, building a company that maintained the personal, family-like character that set them apart, while also having the professional structure to compete with Rio's largest firms. Carolina excelled as a human resources manager, fostering a work environment where employees felt valued, motivated, and respected. Rodrigo focused his energy on the technical and commercial fronts, developing innovative projects that combined superior quality with competitive costs, earning a reputation for reliability and excellence that spread rapidly. At the end of their first year of independence, Rodrigo and Carolina celebrated not only the astonishing growth of their company, but also the personal happiness they had found by choosing to follow their hearts. They had a healthy, cheerful son, a prosperous business that employed over 50 people, a solid marriage built on true love and mutual respect, and a future that seemed ever more brilliant. Carolina, who a year earlier had been a domestic worker worried about paying the bills, was now a respected entrepreneur who participated in major decisions and actively contributed to the growth of one of the most promising construction firms in Rio. And Rodrigo, who had left behind a life of inherited wealth, discovered he was more than capable of building his own fortune, one based on hard work, integrity, and a true partnership with the woman he loved. They had proven to themselves and to the world that true love, when combined with determination and hard work, could overcome any obstacle. They had built a solid foundation for a happy and prosperous life, one that didn't depend on family inheritance or social privilege, but on their own merit and the strength of a genuine union between two people who complemented each other perfectly. During the quiet nights in their cozy apartment, with Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his crib and company projects organized on the dining table that doubled as their makeshift office, Rodrigo and Carolina would talk. They marveled at how their lives had completely changed in just 1 year. how the courageous decision to follow their hearts had led to a happiness neither had imagined possible. They knew challenges still lay ahead, that building a company from scratch demanded constant work and tireless dedication. But they also knew they had found a formula for success that went far beyond money. It was a true partnership, a solid love, and a united family that faced every difficulty as a team, determined to win. While Rodrigo and Carolina celebrated Gabriel's first birthday and the extraordinary growth of their company, Constructora Santana was facing the worst crisis in its history. Margareth watched helplessly as everything she and her late husband had built over decades of sacrifice crumbled around her. The problems, which began as minor project delays, had snowballed into an avalanche of canceled contracts, lawsuits for breach of deadlines, and a tarnished reputation that drove potential clients away before negotiations even began. The company that was once synonymous with excellence in the Rio de Janeiro market was now seen as a failing enterprise, managed by a stubborn matriarch who refused to admit she had made a terrible mistake by casting out her own son, the very soul of the family business. Desperately, Margaret tried to hire new executives, offering exorbitant salaries to experienced professionals. She invested fortunes in advertising campaigns to restore the company's image, but nothing could compensate for the loss of Rodrigo's technical and commercial leadership. The situation became unsustainable when three of Constructora Santana's largest clients canceled multi-million-dollar contracts in a single week, citing a lack of confidence in the company's ability to deliver projects with the quality and punctuality that had once been its hallmark. These cancellations were not just a devastating financial loss, they were a fatal blow to the credibility the company had spent years building. The bitter irony was not lost on Margareth. She discovered that many of these clients were migrating directly to Rodrigo's new firm, drawn by the combination of technical competence, personalized service, and competitive prices he offered. She had lost her son to protect the family business. Yet the business was collapsing precisely because she had lost her son. During sleepless nights in her empty mansion, Margareth was forced to confront the painful reality. Her pride and social prejudices had cost her not only her family's happiness, but also the financial stability she had always held above all else. It was on a rainy Tuesday morning that Margareth finally made the most difficult decision of her life. She would swallow her pride, find her son, and beg for his forgiveness and his help to save the family company. She drove to Rodrigo's office in Ipanema, cycling through all the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, and sadness, the hallmarks of accepting total defeat. When she arrived at the commercial building, she was struck by the bustle of clients and employees, a clear testament to the success Rodrigo had achieved on his own terms. She waited in the reception area for nearly an hour, watching Carolina answer phones, coordinate meetings, and demonstrate a professional competence that completely shattered the prejudiced image Margareth had created of a conniving housemaid. When she was finally called into Rodrigo's office, she found herself facing a man more mature, more confident, more fulfilled than the son she had thrown out of her home 2 years before. "Rodrigo," Margaret began, her voice thick with emotion, "I came here to admit that I made the biggest mistake of my life when I sent you away. The company is failing. We are losing everything. And I know it's my fault for not valuing what you meant to the business." Rodrigo listened to his mother's words in silence, showing no satisfaction at a confession that simply confirmed everything he had predicted. With tears in her eyes, Margareth continued, I was wrong about Carolina, wrong about both of you, wrong about everything. She is a wonderful woman, and you are an exemplary father and husband. I am begging you to come home, take over the company again. Give us a chance to rebuild our family and our business. She paused, took a deep breath, and made the offer she thought would be irresistible. I accept Carolina as my daughter-in-law. I will love your son as my legitimate grandson. I will give you everything you had before, and so much more. Please forgive me and come home. Rodrigo heard his mother's proposal with a serenity that showed how much he had matured. He stood up, walked over to her, and answered with a gentleness she hadn't expected. Mother, I forgive you completely. I know you acted thinking you were protecting the family's interests, even if you were misguided. I understand it was difficult for you to accept the changes, and I hold no grudge for what happened. A wave of relief washed over Margareth, but Rodrigo continued with a respectful firmness that made his decision clear. However, I will not be returning to the family company. Carolina and I have built our own life, our own business, our own happiness. We have a family that works, a thriving business we created with our own effort, and an independence that fills us with pride. Margaret insisted, offering more generous terms, promising radical changes, swearing she would be a doting grandmother and a respectful mother-in-law. But Rodrigo remained steadfast. Mother, the family's money was never what mattered most to me. What I wanted was love, acceptance, and respect for my choices. Carolina gave me all of that, and together, we built a life based on values that are more solid than any inheritance. He took his mother's hands gently and concluded, You will always be my mother, and I will always love you. You are welcome to know your grandson, to be a part of our lives. But our company and our independent family, our accomplishments, we will not abandon. We have proven that we can be happy and prosperous without depending on inheritances or family privilege. Margareth left her son's office heartbroken, but with a new understanding of what she had truly lost. She understood that wealth without family was meaningless, that success without happiness was empty, and that some choices have permanent consequences. Rodrigo, Carolina, and Gabriel represented a true family she had rejected, and now she would have to live with that choice for the rest of her life. 5 years passed. Life had rewarded Rodrigo's courageous choice in ways that surpassed his most optimistic dreams. The company that began in a small room now occupied an entire building in Ipanema, employing over 200 people. It was recognized as one of the most respected and innovative construction firms in Rio de Janeiro. Carolina, once a humble housekeeper, had transformed into a respected businesswoman. Having completed her business administration degree through night courses, she now participated in management seminars, gave interviews to trade magazines, and was invited to join important corporate boards. Gabriel, now a bright and affectionate 4-year-old, attended one of the best private schools in the city. The family's joy was completed when Carolina gave birth to their second child, a beautiful girl they named Sophia. The arrival of the youngest brought even more harmony to their home, where they had created an environment of love, stability, and solid values. a stark contrast to the cold mansion where Rodrigo grew up. The children were raised with an education that valued not only professional success, but also humility, generosity, and respect for all people, regardless of their social origin. Rodrigo discovered a hands-on, present fatherhood that his own father had never shown. Carolina proved to be a loving and wise mother, perfectly balancing her professional responsibilities with family care, teaching her children by example that it was possible to be successful in business without losing one's maternal essence. Their story became an inspiring example in the media of how true love could overcome social barriers and generate prosperity based on merit. They became benchmarks in Rio's business community, not just for their financial success, but for the ethical and humane way they conducted their business, always prioritizing quality, employee well-being, and genuine client satisfaction. Meanwhile, Margareth had to accept the final bankruptcy of Constructora Santana. She sold the remaining assets to settle the debts accumulated during years of mismanagement. She kept only the mansion where she lived alone with her memories and regrets, sustained by personal investments made during years of prosperity. The proud matriarch had become a lonely woman who finally understood that wealth without love is worthless. Rodrigo maintained a respectful contact with his mother, bringing the children to visit her regularly. His forgiveness was genuine, even if a full reconciliation was no longer possible. Margaret became a loving grandmother to Gabriel and Sophia, trying to compensate for lost years with gestures of love that showed how her perspective on what truly matters in life had changed. At the end of another prosperous year, Rodrigo and Carolina stood on the balcony of their Copacabana penthouse, looking out at the sea that had witnessed so many important moments of their journey. With their children sleeping peacefully, they spoke of how their lives had transformed since that first glance in the mansion, how the courageous decision to follow their hearts had led to a happiness that surpassed any material privilege they left behind. Carolina, now a mature and fulfilled woman, looked at her husband with the same love as the first day, but enriched by the complicity of having built a life with the right person. Rodrigo held his wife's hand, knowing he had made the best decision of his life when he chose true love over social conventions. They had proven that true love, when accompanied by hard work, solid values, and the determination to overcome obstacles, can create a life richer and more meaningful than any inherited privilege. And so, we come to the end of another moving story. The journey of Rodrigo and Carolina teaches us that true love has the power to transform lives, to overcome barriers that seem insurmountable, and to create a genuine happiness that goes far beyond what money can buy. When we look at this story, we see that the most difficult decisions in life are often the ones that lead us to the most beautiful destinations. Rodrigo could have chosen financial security, but he chose the wealth of the heart. Carolina could have settled for less, but she believed she deserved a true love. Together, they proved that when two people unite with genuine purpose, hard work, and solid values, there is no dream that cannot become a reality. Life sometimes presents us with choices that test our courage, but when we follow our hearts with wisdom, when we fight for what is right, the universe conspires in our favor. It is worth being brave. It is worth believing in love. It is worth fighting for our dreams. If our journey together has brought you to this moment, I have a special request. Please, let us know you enjoyed today's story with a heartfelt like. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell, as there are so many more moving stories waiting just for you. I would love to know where in the world you're joining us from. Please share your city or country in the comments below. It brings me such joy to know that our thread of hope family is woven all across the globe. And please, don't forget to share this story with that special person in your life who might need a message of hope today. Sometimes, a story like this can touch a heart that is navigating difficult times, inspire someone to believe in love again, or give strength to a soul facing a courageous decision. May your lives be blessed abundantly. I wish for you and your families a future filled with love, prosperity, and radiant health. When life presents you with challenging choices, may you have the courage to follow your heart, and may you always find the strength to build the happiness you so richly deserve. I will leave you with these thoughts for now, but I will be back very soon with another story to stir your soul. With a warm embrace from the Thread of Hope channel. Until next time.